St Anne's is an area of Nottingham, northeast of the city centre, home to approximately 23,000 people. If you're walking around St Anne's today, you might notice the occasional mention of a well in street names and public art, but you probably don't think much about it. This magic well, with healing powers and connections to Robin Hood, gave the area its name. Up until the 19th century, what is now Nottingham city centre was the entirety of Nottingham, and what is now St Anne's was part of Nottingham's Clayfield. Names associated with the old Clayfield persist in street names today. A hill where a lot of peas were grown was known as Peas Hill. Another area became known as the Hunger Hills, possibly because the area wasn't very fertile, or possibly coming from the Anglo-Saxon word hangra, referring to the clay soil. And somewhere in the forest northeast of the Hunger Hills, there was a freshwater spring, where the water was cold and clean. Chapter 1. Magic Water. For thousands of years, clean water was a rarity, as it still is in many parts of the world today. Cultures found ways to sterilize dirty water, either by boiling it to make hot drinks such as tea, or brewing it to produce alcoholic drinks. When a natural spring of fresh, clean water was discovered, it was often seen as miraculous, a sacred site where the water didn't give you the St Anne's Well enters recorded history with the names Broadwell and Oweswell. These Anglo-Saxon names imply that the well had been in use for some time before the Norman conquest, though for how long for we can only speculate. Shortly after the Norman conquest, Norman knight William Peverel became the lord of 162 manors across England and started construction on Nottingham Castle. In the early 1100s, he founded a priory of Benedictine monks not far from Nottingham Castle, in the village of Lenton. At some point, these monks took control of the well and dedicated it to St Anne, and in 1409 they had St Anne's Chapel constructed nearby. St Anne is a character from the Bible's expanded universe, the apocryphal books that didn't become part of the Bible itself. She is Jesus' grandmother, the Virgin Mary's mum. In the early centuries of the Christian Church, there was no agreed set of New Testament books. There were all sorts of other Gospels, epistles, and apocalypses that were eventually rejected by the Church. St Anne comes from the Gospel of James, which explores the Virgin Mary's backstory. Anne and her husband Joachim were a childless couple, struggling to conceive. And one day, Anne looked up to the heavens and lamented her childlessness. And then an angel appeared.
Anna, Anna, the Lord God has heard your prayer. You will conceive and give birth, and your child will be spoken of everywhere people live.
And that child grew up to be the Virgin Mary. Anne became the patron saint of, amongst many other things, pregnant women, housewives, grandmothers, miners, and lace makers. Nottingham had a strong lace industry for many centuries, so she was a popular saint for the area. Though locals still preferred to call the well Robin Hood's Well, after the increasingly popular legends of the local outlaw, and the belief that his gang had used the well as a meeting place. The water from the well was supposedly the second coldest in all of England. It was cold enough to kill a toad, and was visited by people hoping to bathe in it for relief from all sorts of illnesses and afflictions, from joint pain to leprosy. For just over 100 years, the well was a reliable source of income for the monks. But then, everything changed when Henry VIII wanted a divorce. He split with the Catholic Church, established the Church of England, and disbanded Catholic monasteries and friaries across the country, seizing their land and assets for the crown. In February 1538, the priory was disbanded, and Prior Nicholas Heath, along with 8 other monks and 4 manual labourers, were imprisoned for treason, and later hung, drawn, and quartered. The Priory Hospital became the Priory Church of St Anthony, next to Priory Sculpture Park. The main Priory building was demolished, its stone recycled for new buildings. On Priory Street is the stump of a pillar, the last remnant of the monk's home. Chapter 2. Entertainment Complex. St Anne's Well was taken over by the Nottingham Council, who got the Woodward, who tended the woodland, to look after it. The chapel was demolished and replaced by the Woodward's farmhouse, which was also a pub. In order to support the Woodward and the Well, every year, on Easter Monday, Nottingham's representatives would go on a nice walk and then spend a lot of money having a big feast at the Woodward's pub. The Easter Monday feast was dropped sometime in the 1600s, possibly because of Puritan influence, possibly because of the Civil War, or possibly because the pub was successful enough that it no longer needed this annual subsidy. After all, during summer, St Anne's Well was the place to be.
This well is all summer long much frequented, and there are but few fair days between March and October in which some company or other of the town use not to fetch a walk to this well. There are many meetings of gentlemen, both from the town and the country, making choice of this place rather than the town for their rendezvous by reason of the sweetness and openness of the air, where they have natural music without charge, in the spring by the nightingale, and in the autumn by the woodlark. Among other meetings, I may not omit one royal and remarkable assembly at this place, whereof myself was an eyewitness, which was that it pleased our late sovereign King James, in his return from hunting in this forest, to honour this well with his royal presence, and attended by many others of the nobility, where they drank the Woodward and his barrels dry.
The road leading to the well became known as St Anne's Well Road, and Nottingham's North Ward was eventually renamed St Anne's Ward. The well was so popular that a veritable entertainment complex built up around it. In addition to the well and the pub,
there is a delightful garden and pleasure ground in which the company are allowed to walk, and there are swings for young people to amuse themselves, but the rarest object of attraction is the ingeniously formed maze cut out in the green sward.
This maze was called Shepherd's Race. The challenge was to stick to the path and run through it as quickly as possible, without stumbling or stepping onto the longer grass. No one knows how old the maze was. There is speculation that it was first made by the monks, who used it as an exercise track. At some point, the pub decided to capitalise further on the supposed Robin Hood connection, establishing what was probably Nottingham's first Robin Hood museum, containing relics of the outlaw, his cap, his bow, and his old wicker chair. For a fee, visitors could sit in Robin Hood's actual chair and wear Robin Hood's actual cap.
At Christmas, Easter and Whitsuntide, it procures them a great deal of business, for at those times great numbers of young men bring their sweethearts to this well and give them a treat, and the girls think themselves ill-used if they have not been saluted by their lovers in Robin Hood's chair.
The Robin Hood Museum was managed by a secretive group of Robin Hood fanatics called the Brotherhood of the Chair. Supposedly, they held secret meetings, perhaps carried out pagan rituals with Robin Hood-inspired twists. And perhaps they were the true power in Nottingham, controlling the council from the shadows. Or maybe they were just a bunch of Robin Hood fanboys who liked to prat about in the Robin Hood Museum pub. Or maybe the Brotherhood of the Chair still exists, still influences Nottingham from the shadows. By the 1790s, the chair had been sat on so much that only a fragment of it was left. In 1827, the museum closed and the relics were sold at auction to an actor called Lionel Rayner, and from there were lost to history. I have a feeling that they weren't genuine Robin Hood relics. Chapter 3. Potatoes. Potatoes are originally from America, though they are such a part of British cuisine that it is easy to forget this. They were first brought to Britain in the 1500s, and first cultivated in Nottingham in the early 1700s by an Irishman called Robert Purcell, who lived at the St Anne's Well farmhouse pub, which was then managed by a lady called Mrs. Blee. I couldn't find any mention of Mrs. Blee's first name, but if you know it, please tell me in the comments. Purcell got permission to clear away some of the woodland near the well to plant potatoes.
Rip them all down.
While the potato farming was a success, the clearing of the woodland ruined the atmosphere around the well, as one later visitor described.
Many of these trees were my friends, creatures I had known from nut and acorn.
Arriving at the humble cottage, there were the lofty hills and the lovely valley, but where the coppice?
Where is the f***ing coppice?
The well is there. It is a bath and has a dressing room, both excavated out of the rock. The spring is as strong and the water as clear as in the days of Henry IV or bold Robin Hood. But where are the sylvan bowers, the umbrageous glens, and all the gay delights and laughing pleasures of woodland scenery? They are gone, and gone forever.
Coppice Park. It's just not the same.
Chapter 4. Murder. In the 1740s, the St. Answell farmhouse was the scene of a terrible crime. John Clark, one of Mrs. Blee's servants, was found
shot through the head by a piece placed so near to him that his brains were seen scattered about him where he fell.
For 20 years, the murder was unsolved, until John Storr, a local framework knitter, gave information to magistrates. 5 soldiers who had been stationed at Nottingham had gone out deer hunting in the night and, having failed to catch anything, had decided to steal a goose or two from Mrs. Blee's farm, and John Clark had got in the way. 2 of the soldiers, by then old pensioners being treated at Chelsea Hospital in London, were quickly arrested, brought to Nottingham and put in the town dungeons, where the National Justice Museum is today. The others had already died, and lacking any other witnesses, there was not enough evidence to convict the 2 men of the murder, though one of them later confessed on his deathbed. Chapter 5. Well's End. By the early 1800s, the St. Answell pub had acquired a bad reputation for antisocial behaviour, Sabbath breaking, and drunken brawls between its customers. So in 1825, its licence was revoked. This hit hard, precipitating the closure of the Robin Hood Museum in 1827. The pub and the well were taken over by a widow called Lucy Pickard, who rented the space out for private parties. But without the licence to sell alcohol, within a few decades it was out of business again. In 1845, the Nottingham Enclosure Act passed through Parliament, so the town could expand onto its common land. Houses could be built on the Clayfield, and Nottingham's St. Anne's ward expanded further in the direction of the famous Magic Well. The well itself was by now in ruins, not having been maintained after the pub went out of business. There was enough lingering affection for the Magic Well that in 1855 the council decided to redevelop the area, spending £100 to tidy it up and build a new monument over the well, though there is some dispute about whether this monument was built on the actual site of the well or just nearby. Either way, the monument itself didn't last very long.
I will not let you tear down this fountain. Ancient warriors on grand quests drank from its flowing waters.
Barley.
They're destroying the town's past.
Ugh.
In 1887, the site of the well was completely demolished to make way for the Nottingham Suburban Railway, which had a station named after the well it had destroyed. This railway line was completely closed by 1954, and subsequent redevelopments removed almost all traces of it. Best estimates for the location of the well place it somewhere along the Wells Road, between Kildare Road and Wells Gardens. A 2018 archaeological survey, carried out before some new houses could be built, found no remnants of the old well or farmhouse. While the well itself is gone, it lives on in street names and public art, and its magic water still flows, unseen, beneath the houses and the streets of St. Anne's.